This is Lisa with Lisa's Landscape and Design, and today we're going to do a quick tutorial on how to do your own landscape design. One of my most popular services is a landscape consultation, and in that consultation what I'm actually doing is providing you with some basic concepts. So I'm going to outline the general area. I'm going to give you maybe some curvature of your bed and a list of plants for you to use, and then your job, should you decide to accept it, is to then go into your own space and figure out the actual dimensions, what plants you're going to use in that space, and how you're going to kind of dedicate each section of the landscape. But one of the first things you're going to want to do is to create a grid. And in this design, you can see this is a very small courtyard. You can see that I've actually dedicated every 2 feet to part of my grid. This could be done if you have a larger space on 5-foot increments, 10-foot increments, whatever you're more comfortable working in. The tools that I'm using, literally, I have a pencil. I have my cool little templates. You don't have to use this. You could just make different designs for each plant. It's not necessary. And on these templates, I'm actually marking the foot for each one. So what you're going to do is go to your grid, figure out which square fits in 2 feet, and then that's going to be your 2-foot mark, and then you literally just kind of do that throughout the space. Obviously, you're going to need a handy little ruler, a good eraser, and a pencil sharpener. I mean, this is pretty much your kit. And of course, then you're going to take the information that I've provided, which is your concept sketches, the plant list, your educated plant list, which tells you what plants do best in your space, and sunlight, most importantly. And then, obviously, grab your survey. You can, if you don't have a survey, you can take measurements of the place or space. And then another thing you're going to want to do, which I've done in here, is to figure out where your trees are located. Trees are something that we're going to have to deal with the root zone. So where you see these little T's and a question mark, that is to suggest, is this about the correct location? And in those spaces, you're going to want to leave some extra wiggle room, because if it's an oak tree, you're going to have roots coming out in different areas, and you're going to want to make some modifications in those spaces. But for the most part, this is going to be an easy tool for you to discern exactly how much square feet distance, see, from the edge of the yard to that tree, and then distance from the edge of the fence to the tree, and then you're going to have some really good indicators of where you can put plants outside of that space. And this grid, as I mentioned, it's marked off in 2-foot increments. So as you can see, these 2 rectangles are chaise lounges. I am just kind of playing with how we can lay this out. So we're coming off our back porch. We've got a metal edge, which is what those lines are, stepping stones that go, I'm going to just take you on a little tour, over to the side yard. We got a little fire pit and a bench sitting. Again, very intimate space. And what we're looking for then is some privacy. So along the edge, and I've marked these, I have Scarlet's Peak or Skyline Yaupon. These are going to get about 3 feet wide, but they'll get about 15, 20 feet tall. So what I've drawn here in the scale is the 3 feet wide dimension. And the reason for that, of course, is because I want to make sure that these have room to grow to maturity. It's really not important on this particular design what the height is, as long as you are making sure as you are layering plants that you're not putting taller things in front of shorter things, which is true in any landscape design. But most importantly, we want to make sure we have the room for the hardscapes, which is this area, obviously, your rock and metal. And then we've made plenty of room for the mulched area, which is going to include our plants and existing trees. Here I've listed 3 Jerusalem sage. You could use rose pavonia or Turk's cap. This is just giving the client options that they can choose from some of their preferences. In a consultation, I wouldn't be this specific. I would just show you where you could layer plants, and I'm going to write a number that corresponds with the height of the plant list that I've provided. But in this case, I've gotten more specific since it was such a small space, and this was what the client had requested and of course paid for, is to have something more detailed, and I wanted to give them options. In front of that, although I don't have those marked, that would be a 1. Those little 5 circles there would be a number 1. That's dwarf Ruellia. Now we have our tree, of course. Beyond that is a number 4. That means that's 4 feet wide. It's a shrimp plant I've marked. These are number 2s. Could be a Dianella, flax lily, or foxtail fern. These are all numbered as well. This one would be the number 2, Caitlin's giant ajuga, number 1. would be the silver queen or tricolor ajuga, or burgundy would work as well. And I've done this all along the border. And so if you're doing this yourself, what you would do, and you can see if it's 3 feet wide and that is a 2-foot square, I'm going to take up 1.5 squares all around to create this 3-foot wide circle. Then I'm going to give a little room between each plant to make sure they can grow to maturity. When I draw a design, I am drawing with the mature plant size in mind. These numbers are the maximum growth that I would anticipate from a plant, and that's not to say that they're all going to stay exactly in that parameter. Depending on the location, sun, conditions, some will grow larger than expected, some will grow smaller, and you'll even see in the plant descriptions that many of them vary wildly, and that's the reason, is because it's hard to predict some of these. If they're in really exceptional spots, that they might, get a little brave and take on more room. Some will stay a little smaller. But in general, these are going to be the size of the plants that you're looking at. Here, again, 3 foot wide. These happen to be soft caress mahonia. These are going to be taking up 1.5 squares. And you see how I've done this. On a 2-foot grid, they're each marked. Each little square is marked. Again, this could be a 5-foot grid. This could be a 10-foot grid. It depends on how big your space is. You're going to want to calculate the distance of your trees, existing trees in those beds. You're going to want to make provisions for the metal edge or whatever border that you're using, which are these hard lines along the sidewalk area. The stepping stones, we're going to want to calculate. Here you can see they're about 3 feet. It's taken up approximately, maybe a little less, between 2.5 and 3 feet, because 2 squares is going to equal 4 feet. So now we've come to a patio area, same thing. We can sort of almost determine how many stones we would need if we were calculating based on their basic width. That being said, if you get a pallet of stone, you're not going to be able to calculate how many exactly, because the sizes vary wildly. But in general, this should be a pretty easy task for you to put this together on your own. There's some online software. Frankly, I like to do it myself because I find that a lot of the plants aren't available on many of these software. You can maybe choose the size, but you're not going to be able to actually choose the plant. And what is nice here is you can give yourself some options, as I've listed here. It doesn't have to just be one. Sometimes there are several options that will work in that space. And that way, when you put together your plant list, you can choose one or any of those that you know would work and that you like. This is a shade garden. That's why these plants have been selected. This is going to be pretty deep shade. I've got up here an option that we could even add a tree, which would take up a little more real estate. And one of the things about trees that I think is really important to remember is they're taller and they're going to be wider. So, for example, where we have these trees, they're going to have big, large canopies, but I don't have any plants that are going to compete with them here. If you do have trees close together, you're wanting to add trees for privacy, do take in consideration the circumference of those trees. And then you would have larger circles, obviously, over these smaller ones that would indicate that would be the canopy, and then these would be the understory plants. So I think this should give a really good example of how you can do it yourself. You can break it down into bite-sized pieces. This could be done by the bed. This could be done as your entire space, your front builder's beds. If you're looking to just replant those, you're going to take basic measurements. You're going to put those down on paper, the basic shape, give it some kind of square foot grid in measurement, and then start to lay out the plants that you like, taking up the appropriate space, and then now we have a plant count. And you always, when you're designing, you want to design with odd numbers. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9 looks intentionally unintentional, and it will give you a really organic look to it without too much symmetry or too much matchy-matchy. You're really looking to kind of shake it up a bit. Now, in this case, these soft caress mahonias are the same plant that I used over here. So when I say not matchy-matchy, it doesn't mean that you're not going to use the same plants everywhere. But you can, again, maybe even change the configuration, where I have some in a straight line, and then I have some here in a grouping. So play with that a little bit and see how they fit into your space. That's going to give you a little more flexibility when it comes to your design strategy. So with that, I think you've got a really good head start, and I hope you go and get your design on.